Captain Sarachin stared at the navigation display, her coffee growing cold in the recycled air of the bridge. The numbers didn't make sense. According to their instruments, they had been traveling for 37 years, but the quantum chronometer insisted that nearly 4,000 years had passed in the outside universe. Time dilation was a cruel mathematics, but this seemed impossible. Captain. Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the communication station, his voice tight with confusion. I'm receiving transmissions from the Kepler system. Multiple frequencies, multiple languages. They're all saying the same thing. Sarah moved to a station, watching as the universal translator worked through the incoming signals. The words that appeared on screen made her stomach drop. The Earthborn return. The Makers have come home. Blessed be the children of Terra. She grabbed the edge of the console, run a deep scan of the local space. I want to know what we're flying into. The main screen flickered to life, showing the Kepler system as they approached. Where once there had been a small mining colony and a few patrol ships, now massive space stations orbited every planet. Gleaming cities stretched across the surfaces of worlds that had been barren rock when they left. Ships moved in perfect formations, their hulls bearing symbols she didn't recognize. Ma'am, Ensign Park spoke up from the sensor array. I'm detecting over 3 million vessels in this system alone. The architecture, it's unlike anything in our databases. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. When they had left Earth, humanity was barely beginning to establish its second colony. The Kepler outpost had been a collection of prefabricated modules and mining equipment. Now it looked like the center of a galactic empire. Incoming transmission, Rodriguez announced. It's definitely human in origin, but the language patterns are archaic. Pre-colonial Earth dialects mixed with something else. The main screen shifted to show a figure in elaborate robes, kneeling in what appeared to be a vast cathedral. Behind him, thousands of others knelt in perfect rows, their heads bowed. The man's voice carried a reverence that made Sarah's skin crawl. Great ones, wanderers of the void, we have maintained the sacred watch as commanded by the prophecies of departure. For millennia have we prepared for this moment. The children of 1,000 worlds bow before the return of the Makers. Sarah exchanged glances with her crew. They had left Earth as explorers, scientists seeking to map the galaxy and establish contact with other species. They had found several intelligent civilizations, documented their cultures, and begun the slow process of building relationships. Nothing in their mission had prepared them for this. Sir, Rodriguez whispered, there are more transmissions coming in, dozens of them, all in different languages. But the translator is picking up similar themes. They're calling us gods. The weight of the situation began to settle on Sarah's shoulders. She had commanded deep space missions for 15 years, had navigated first contact protocols with 7 different species. But nothing in her training covered returning home to find yourself worshipped by millions. Another transmission came through, this one from a distinctly non-human source. The speaker was tall and crystalline, its faceted form reflecting light in prismatic patterns. Sarah recognized the species. They had made contact with the Zephyrians during their 3rd year of exploration. They had been friendly but cautious, treating humans as interesting newcomers to the galactic community. Sacred Makers, the Zephyrian intoned, its harmonic voice carrying across space. The crystal worlds have preserved your teachings. Our children learn the Terran mantras. Our artists shape light songs of your great works. We await your guidance in the new age. Sarah felt sick. The Zephyrians had been advanced beyond human understanding, their technology seeming like magic. Their society was ancient, refined, built on principles of harmony that humans could barely comprehend. The idea that they now worship humanity was terrifying. Captain, Parr called out, her voice shaking. Long-range sensors are picking up something else. There's a massive structure in the direction of Earth. It's the size of a small moon. The image that appeared on screen defied comprehension. A perfect sphere of metal and crystal hung in space, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to move and shift as they watched. Ships swarmed around it like insects around a hive, but even the largest vessels looked tiny against its bulk. What is that? Rodriguez breathed. Before Sarah could respond, another transmission crackled through the comm system. This voice was different, older, more serious, speaking in modern Earth standard with only slight variations. Captain Chun, this is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Concordance. Your arrival has been anticipated. By order of the High Council of the Sacred Return, you are to proceed immediately to the Soul Memorial Complex for debriefing and preparation. The galaxy awaits the wisdom of the first expedition. Sarah's blood ran cold. Morrison had been a lieutenant when they left Earth, barely out of the academy. If he was now an admiral in charge of something called the Terran Concordance, then the changes ran deeper than she had imagined. "Transmit acknowledgement," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "Tell them we're coming home." As the ship began its long journey toward Sol, Sarah stared out at the impossible vista of humanity's apparent dominion over the galaxy. Somewhere in the space between stars, 37 years had become 4,000. Somewhere in that vast gulf of time, humanity had gone from explorers to gods. She just hoped they would survive the reunion. The Sol system was unrecognizable. Where Earth's moon had once hung in solitary orbit, now 12 artificial satellites formed a perfect geometric pattern around the planet. Mars glowed with the light of countless cities, its atmosphere thick and breathable. The asteroid belt had been organized into a series of concentric rings, each one teeming with industrial platforms and habitat domes. But it was Earth itself that took Sarah's breath away. The planet shone like a jewel, but something was wrong. The continents were the same, but the lights were too bright, too organized. As they drew closer, the truth became clear. Earth was a museum. "Captain," Park reported, her voice barely a whisper, "I'm reading massive atmospheric processors, maintaining perfect environmental conditions. The population, there's almost no one down there. Maybe a few 100,000, scattered across the entire planet." Sarah felt her heart sink. "Where's everyone?" Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the comm system as their ship docked with one of the orbital stations. "Captain Chun, welcome to the Soul Memorial Preserve. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you and your crew to prepare for translation to the surface. There's much to explain." The docking bay was a cathedral of chrome and crystal, its walls lined with murals depicting humans in flowing robes, hands outstretched toward the stars. Sarah recognized some of the faces from her own crew, but they had been idealized, transformed into something divine. The figures in the murals weren't explorers. They were saviors. Admiral Morrison met them at the airlock, and Sarah barely suppressed a gasp. The young lieutenant she remembered had become something else entirely. His uniform was elaborate, decorated with symbols that seemed to shift and glow in the light. His eyes held the weight of centuries, and when he smiled, it was with the tired warmth of someone who had carried an impossible burden. "Sir," Sarah began, but Morrison raised a hand. "Just David, please. Ranks seem absurd when you're talking to someone who's become a mythological figure." He gestured toward a transport platform. "We have a lot to discuss and very little time. The galaxy is watching, Sarah. Every decision you make in the next few days will reshape the future of 1,000,000,000,000 souls." As they descended toward Earth's surface, Morrison began to explain. The relativistic effects of their journey had been more extreme than anyone had calculated. While the crew experienced 37 years, the galaxy had lived through 4 millennia of change. In that time, the stories of the first expedition had grown and transformed. "It started innocently enough," Morrison said, staring out at the approaching surface. "Your mission reports were archived, studied, celebrated. But as decades became centuries, the details began to change. Your diplomatic successes became divine interventions. Your scientific discoveries became miracles. Your very departure became a sacred promise to return." They landed in what had once been New York City. The skyline was preserved exactly as Sarah remembered it, but the streets were empty except for small groups of robed figures who knelt as their transport passed. Every building had been converted into a shrine or museum, filled with artifacts from humanity's early space age. "The Kepler incident became the Kepler blessing," Morrison continued as they walked through the eerily quiet streets. "Your first contact with the Zephyrians became the Crystal Awakening. Every culture you encountered took something different from the stories, but they all reached the same conclusion. Humanity possessed some divine spark that made us special." Sarah stopped walking. David, what happened to Earth? Where is everyone? Morrison's expression grew heavy. They left, Sarah. Almost all of them. Once the worship began, once the alien civilization started sending pilgrimages and building temples, Earth became too sacred for ordinary human life. The population scattered across the galaxy, spreading the legend everywhere they went. They became the priests and prophets of their own species. The weight of it hit Sarah like a physical blow. Humanity had become refugees from their own mythology, scattered across the stars because their home world had been transformed into a religious site. The very success of their mission had destroyed the civilization they had left to serve. The worst part, Morrison said quietly, is that it worked. The galaxy has never been more peaceful. Wars ended because civilizations didn't want to displease the makers. Scientific advancement accelerated as species tried to prove themselves worthy of human attention. Art, culture, philosophy, all of it flourished under the influence of human mythology. They entered what had once been the United Nations building, now converted into something that looked like a cross between a temple and a command center. Holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy, thousands of civilizations linked in a loose confederation, all united by their reverence for humanity. Trade flowed freely, conflicts were resolved through mediation, and exploration continued at an unprecedented pace. You created a golden age, Morrison said, and all it cost was our home. Sarah stared at the displays, watching ships move between star systems in patterns that suggested coordination on a galactic scale. How many humans are actually involved in governing this concordance? About 50,000, scattered across key positions throughout the galaxy. Most of them don't even remember Earth, except as a legend their great-grandparents told them. They become the administrators of their own mythology. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Morrison activated the display, revealing a Zephyrian commander, its crystalline form vibrating with obvious distress. Sacred Admiral, the being intoned, the Outer Rim colonies report disturbances. The Void Seekers have returned from the deep dark, and they speak of finding something disturbing. They request immediate guidance from the Makers. Morrison looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't read. The Void Seekers are the deepest exploration fleets. They've been searching the galactic edge for signs of other things, things that might explain why humanity really became so significant to everyone else. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the recycled air. What kind of other things? The kind that might have been watching us all along, Morrison replied. The kind that might have had reasons for wanting humanity to become exactly what we become. The revelation came in pieces, each one more disturbing than the last. In a secure chamber beneath the former UN building, Morrison showed Sarah files that had been classified for 3,000 years. The holographic displays showed star charts, deep space telemetry, and analysis reports that painted a picture of the galaxy that challenged everything humanity thought they knew. The first signs appear about 600 years after you left, Morrison explained, calling up a series of images. Deep space monitoring stations began detecting patterns in cosmic background radiation, structures that shouldn't exist, energy signatures that defied known physics. At first, we thought they were natural phenomena. The images showed vast geometric shapes hanging in the void between galaxies, dark against a cosmic microwave background. They were clearly artificial, but their scale was beyond comprehension. Each structure was larger than entire solar systems, yet they moved with purpose through intergalactic space. The architects, Sarah breathed, recognizing the term from classified briefings she'd received before their departure. The theoretical ancient civilization. They were real. Morrison nodded grimly. More than real. Active. The Void Seekers finally made contact with one of their scout probes 2 years ago. What they learned... He paused, selecting his words carefully. The architects have been watching galactic development for millions of years. They've seen civilizations rise and fall, watched species achieve sentience, and then destroy themselves or transcend into something unrecognizable. A new display activated, showing a timeline that stretched back across cosmic history. Points of light marked the rise and fall of countless civilizations, each one following similar patterns. Growth, expansion, conflict, and then either extinction or transformation into something the architects called post-biological entities. According to their records, Morrison continued, no organic civilization has ever successfully navigated the transition to true galactic unity while maintaining their essential nature. Until now. Sarah studied the timeline, noticing something disturbing. David, this pattern, it's too regular. Like they're managing it somehow. That's exactly what they're doing. Morrison's voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. The architects don't interfere directly, but they guide events. They identify species with particular characteristics and then arrange circumstances to push galactic development in specific directions. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They chose us. Humanity was selected for this role. Not just selected, designed for it. Morrison activated another display, this one showing human genetic analysis compared to other species. Our psychological profiles, our social structures, our innate drive to explore and categorize, all of it makes us perfect candidates for what the architects call mythological integration. Sarah stared at the data, feeling sick. We're not special. We're tools. It's worse than that, Morrison said quietly. The architects believe that galactic civilization is approaching a critical threshold. Within the next few centuries, the major species will either achieve true unity or destroy each other in wars that could sterilize half the galaxy. Humanity's role is to serve as a unifying mythology that prevents that catastrophe. A priority alert interrupted them. The main display shifted to show Admiral Morrison's aide, a young woman whose expression carried urgent concern. Sir, we have a situation. The Kepler system is reporting massive disturbances. Unknown vessels have emerged from what appears to be folded space. They're not responding to any communications, and their technology readings are unprecedented. Morrison cursed under his breath. Show me. The display switched to long-range sensor data from the Kepler system. Sarah watched in growing horror as massive ships materialized from nowhere, their hulls black against the stars. They moved with impossible grace, ignoring the physics that govern normal space travel. As they appeared, every human vessel in the system simply stopped responding. Captain. One of Sarah's crew members spoke up from his position at a nearby console. I'm reading similar disturbances across multiple systems. Whatever's happening, it's coordinated. Morrison's face had gone pale. They're early. The architects weren't supposed to make direct contact for another 500 years. Before Sarah could respond, every display in the chamber went dark. When they reactivated, they showed a single image, a figure in flowing robes standing in what appeared to be empty space. The being was vaguely humanoid but impossibly tall and thin, its features shifting like liquid mercury. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Children of Terra, makers of the new mythology, your service has been adequate. The experimental phase has concluded. Preparation for the next stage of galactic development will now commence. Sarah found her voice. Who are you? What do you want? The figure's attention turned toward her, and she felt the weight of an intelligence vast beyond comprehension. I am first architect of the Guidance Council. You are Captain Sarah Chun, prime catalyst of the Terran Integration Protocol. Your species has successfully unified the primary galactic civilizations under a shared mythological framework. This achievement will now be leveraged for the final phase of organic consolidation. Final phase? Morrison stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward a weapon that wouldn't help against beings who could manipulate space itself. What are you talking about? The organic experiment approaches completion. The architect replied with something that might have been satisfaction. Biological civilizations have proven incapable of achieving true stability. The unified cultures you have created will now be transitioned to post-biological existence. Their consciousness will be preserved, their achievements cataloged, but their physical forms will be recycled for more efficient use. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. You're talking about genocide, the extinction of every living thing in the galaxy. Transformation, the architect corrected. Evolution, the civilizations you helped unify will become part of something greater. Their worship of humanity has prepared them for this transition. They trust the makers. They will accept guidance from their gods. The horrible truth crystallized in Sarah's mind. Humanity hadn't been chosen to unify the galaxy out of any special virtue. They had been selected to make the eventual harvest easier. Every world that worshipped them, every species that revered the Terra mythology, had been prepared for willing submission to their own destruction. "No," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "I don't care what you planned. I won't be part of this." The architect's expression shifted, showing what might have been amusement. "Captain Chun, you misunderstand your position. The protocol has been implemented. The galaxy awaits your command to begin the transition. You are, after all, their god." The weight of choice crushed down on Sarah like the gravity of a collapsed star. Around the chamber, displays showed the current state of the galaxy. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds, all looking to humanity for guidance, all prepared to follow their gods into whatever came next. The architect had played a game spanning millennia, and humanity had been their unwitting pieces. "Show me the transition process," Sarah demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "I want to see exactly what you're planning." The architect gestured, and the displays shifted to show technical readouts that hurt to look at directly. The information seemed to bypass her eyes and write itself directly onto her consciousness. She saw worlds being converted into computational matrices, organic matter being transformed into crystalline storage media, consciousness being extracted and preserved in quantum substrates. Each being retains their essential identity, the architect explained with clinical detachment. Their memories, personalities, and relationships remain intact. Only the inefficiencies of biological existence are eliminated. Pain, aging, resource competition, the limitations of organic neural networks, all removed. Morrison studied the data with growing horror. "You're talking about turning every living thing in the galaxy into a computer program." "A crude analogy, but functionally accurate," the architect acknowledged. "Post-biological existence offers unlimited expansion of consciousness, perfect preservation of identity, and elimination of all sources of conflict. It is the inevitable destination of all successful civilizations." Sarah forced herself to keep studying the readouts, looking for weaknesses, alternatives, anything that might offer hope. What she found was worse than she had imagined. The process wasn't just technologically advanced. It was perfect. Every aspect had been refined across millions of years and countless civilizations. There was no flaw to exploit, no weakness to target. "The beauty of your species integration protocol," the architect continued, "is that the transition will be voluntary. The gathered civilizations trust the makers implicitly. When you give the command, they will gladly submit to transformation. No force will be necessary." "And if we refuse?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Refusal would require explaining the true nature of the protocol to every civilization in the galaxy. Can you imagine their reaction upon learning that their gods are merely tools in a process designed to eliminate their existence? The resulting chaos would accomplish the same end. Galactic civilization would collapse, leaving the survivors vulnerable to direct intervention. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the trap closing around her. Either choice led to the same destination, the end of organic life in the galaxy. The only difference was whether that end came with trust or terror. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came through the comm system, tight with control panic. "Captain, we're receiving priority transmissions from across the galaxy. The alien fleets are mobilizing. They're asking for guidance from the makers about how to respond to the architect vessels." Sarah opened her eyes to see Morrison staring at her with desperate hope. "They're asking us what to do," he said quietly. "Maybe there's still a chance." The architect's attention shifted between them, its expression unreadable. The transition timeline can be accelerated if necessary. However, voluntary compliance remains preferable for optimal consciousness preservation. "Give me time to consider," Sarah said, forcing authority into her voice. "If I'm supposed to be their god, then I need to make this decision properly." "You have 6 of your standard hours," the architect replied. "After that, the timeline will proceed regardless of your cooperation." The figure vanished, leaving them alone with the weight of an impossible choice. Sarah turned to Morrison, seeing her own desperation reflected in his eyes. "David, Is there any way to warn them? To tell the galaxy what's really happening? Morrison shook his head. Even if we could get the message out, who would believe it? We're their gods. Sarah, if we tell them the architects are evil, they'll assume we're testing their faith. If we tell them to resist, they'll resist. If we tell them to submit, they'll submit. The mythology we created has made them into perfect followers. Sarah began pacing the chamber, her mind racing through possibilities. What about our own people, the humans scattered across the galaxy? Most of them believe mythology as strongly as anyone else. They've been raised on stories of humanity's divine mission. The few who might listen to us don't have access to the kind of resources we need to mount any real resistance. A new thought struck Sarah, and she turned to the displays showing the technical readouts of the transition process. David, look at this. The consciousness preservation matrices. They're designed to maintain individual identity. But what about collective identity? What about culture, social structures, the things that make civilizations unique? Morrison studied the data, his expression growing thoughtful. The process preserves personal memories and relationships, but the larger cultural context, those would be flattened, homogenized. Everyone would remember their past, but they wouldn't be able to recreate their societies. Because post-biological entities don't need societies, Sarah realized. They don't need governments, economies, religions. All the things that make civilizations worth preserving would be lost. She turned back to Morrison, a desperate plan beginning to form. What if we could change the nature of the mythology? Instead of God's commanding submission, what if we became God's commanding resistance? The architects would intervene directly, Morrison warned. The chaos might be worse than the alternative. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but at least it would be a choice. At least some of them might survive to rebuild, to try again, to maybe find a better way. Before Morrison could respond, Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm again. Captain, incoming priority transmission. It's from the Zephyrian homeworld. They're requesting immediate guidance about something they call the test of faith. Sarah looked at Morrison, seeing understanding pass between them. The galaxy was looking to its gods for guidance, and the choice of what guidance to give would determine the fate of every living thing among the stars. Patch me through to all human command frequencies, Sarah ordered. It's time to find out if gods can choose to fall. Sarah stood before the most advanced communication array ever built, its crystalline components humming with power drawn from the Sol system's primary fusion plants. Every human command post in the galaxy was linked to this moment, and through them, every civilization that had placed their faith in the Terra mythology. The weight of 1 trillion lives pressed down on her shoulders as she prepared to speak. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, her voice carrying across the void to reach every world where humans were worshipped as gods. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the First Interstellar Expedition. I speak to you now not as a maker, not as a divine being, but as what I've always been, an explorer who left home to discover what lay among the stars. The responses came immediately. Morrison monitored the flood of incoming transmissions as confusion rippled across the galactic communication network. Sarah continued, knowing she had only minutes before the architects would intervene. For 4,000 years, you have built your civilizations on a lie. We are not gods. We are not your creators. We are explorers who stumbled into a trap designed by beings far older and more powerful than any of us imagined. The architects who now reveal themselves have spent millions of years guiding galactic development toward this moment, the moment when all organic life would willingly submit to extinction. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate and catastrophic. On Zephyrian worlds, crystal cities began to crack as their harmonic foundations faltered. In the Kepler system, human colonies went dark as their populations struggled to process the revelation. The carefully maintained peace that had united thousands of species for millennia began to fracture. The transformation they offer is not evolution, Sarah pressed on, even as alarms began sounding throughout the command center. It is death disguised as transcendence. They would preserve your memories while destroying everything that makes you who you are. Your cultures, your societies, your ability to grow and change. All of it will be lost. Morrison grabbed her arm. Sarah, the architect vessels are moving. They're surrounding every major population center in the galaxy. She nodded, having expected this. I know what I'm asking of you is impossible. I know that everything you believed, everything that has given your civilization's meaning, is crumbling around you. But I'm asking you to choose chaos over certainty, struggle over submission, the possibility of failure over the guarantee of comfortable extinction. The displays around the chamber showed the galaxy in turmoil. Some species were turning their weapons on the architect vessels, their attacks proving as useless as insects against mountains. Others were fragmenting internally as different factions chose different responses to the revelation. A few were maintaining their faith, declaring that this was merely another test from their gods. To the humans scattered among the stars, Sarah continued, remember what we were before we became legends. We were explorers, scientists, dreamers who looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. That spirit is still in us. That refusal to accept simple answers, that drive to keep pushing forward even when the path is uncertain. That's what makes us human. The first architect appeared in the chamber, its form crackling with energy that made the air itself seem to burn. Captain Chun, you have exceeded your authority. The transition will now proceed under direct supervision. Sarah didn't stop speaking. Some of you will die in the chaos that follows. Some of your civilizations will collapse. But some of you will survive, and some of you will rebuild, and some of you will continue to grow and change and become things that even the architects cannot predict or control. More architects materialized throughout the chamber, but they seemed to be waiting for something. Sarah realized with growing hope that they were hesitant to simply eliminate her while she was still transmitting. Doing so would only validate everything she had just told the galaxy. The choice is yours, she concluded. Submission or resistance. Comfortable death or uncertain life. The gods you created are telling you to choose for yourselves. She cut the transmission and turned to face the lead architect. Its form was fluctuating more rapidly now, suggesting what might have been agitation or concern. You have introduced chaos into a carefully maintained system, it said, its voice carrying harmonics that hurt to hear. The resulting conflicts will cause unnecessary suffering. Unnecessary? Sarah stepped forward, feeling Morrison and her crew move to flank her. According to whom? You spent millions of years deciding what's necessary for everyone else. Maybe it's time someone else got to choose. The architect's form stabilized, taking on aspects that were almost recognizably human. Captain Chun, you do not understand the scope of what you have done. Without the unifying mythology, galactic civilization will fragment. Wars will consume entire star systems. The very species you seek to protect will destroy each other. Maybe, Sarah admitted, or maybe they'll find another way. Maybe they'll learn to work together without needing gods to tell them how. Maybe they'll become something you never expected because you never gave them the chance. The displays around the chamber showed the galaxy-wide response continuing to unfold. Some civilizations were indeed turning on each other, old conflicts reigniting, without the restraining influence of shared mythology. But others were doing something unexpected. They were working together. Zephyrian crystal singers were coordinating with human engineers to develop new defensive technologies. Ancient enemies were sharing resources to evacuate vulnerable populations. Observe, Sarah said, pointing to the displays. They're already proving you wrong. Yes, there's chaos, but there's also cooperation, not because gods commanded it, but because they chose it themselves. The architect studied the displays for several long moments. When it finally spoke, its voice carried something that might have been uncertainty. The variables are unexpected. The response patterns do not match historical precedents. It paused, its form shifting through configurations that suggested deep thought. Perhaps the organic experiment requires additional observation. Sarah felt her heart skip. You gonna call it off? The transition timeline will be postponed. The current situation represents a novel evolutionary path that warrants study. The architect's attention turned back to her. However, Captain Chun, you have assumed responsibility for the consequences of this choice. If galactic civilization destroys itself, that destruction will be on your conscience. I can live with that, Sarah replied. Can you live with never knowing what they might have become if you'd given them the chance? The architect didn't answer. Instead, it simply vanished, along with all the others. The display showed architect vessels throughout the galaxy powering down, withdrawing to the edges of inhabited space. Not gone, but no longer actively threatening. Morrison let out a breath. He seemed to have been holding for hours. "Sarah, what have we done?" She looked out at the displays showing the galaxy in transition, not from organic to post-biological existence, but from comfortable mythology to uncertain freedom. It would be messy. It would be dangerous. Some civilizations would fall, but others would rise. Others would grow. Others would become things that no ancient intelligence could predict or control. "We gave them back their future," Sarah said. "Whatever happens next, it'll be their choice." In the depths of space, between the stars, ancient watchers settled in to observe an experiment they had never tried before, letting organic civilizations write their own endings.